Remember when watching a Christmas cartoon meant clearing your entire evening? No pause button, no rewind, no, I'll catch it later. You either sat down at the right time or you missed it. And for millions of families, missing it felt like missing Christmas itself. That's the kind of power a great holiday special carries. And the story of how those specials came to exist, how a simple animated story about a sad little tree and a kid nobody believed in accidentally rewrote the rules of television, is one of the most wild, last-minute, almost didn't happen stories in broadcasting history. So today we're pulling back the curtain on all of it. The panic behind the scenes. The music executives tried to kill. The child actors who couldn't even read their lines. The product placement hiding inside a show literally about hating commercialism. Let's go. Let's start with the network executives, because their reaction to the first screening tells you everything. These are professional television people. People who've seen hundreds of shows. And when they watched the finished cut, the mood in the room was not celebration. It was quiet, horrified silence. Everything about it broke the rules. The pacing was slow. There was no laugh track to signal when you were supposed to find something funny. The music was jazz, actual jazz, not the bouncy cartoon sound everyone expected. And the voice actors were real children, not trained performers, which meant missed cues, odd rhythms, and raw unpredictability that television in that era simply did not do. The executives were convinced they had a disaster. And here's where it gets good, they couldn't do anything about it. The airtime was already locked. The sponsors had committed. Weeks of promotion had already gone out. There was no backup plan. So they aired it anyway. 45% of America watched. Critics loved it. Families loved it. The disaster became a classic overnight, and the network immediately acted like they believed in it the whole time. Funny how that works. A huge part of why it worked comes down to the creator refusing to compromise. He walked in with a short list of absolutes. First, real children only. Not adults doing kid voices, not trained voice actors softening the edges. Actual kids, with all the awkwardness that comes with them. In an era when most cartoon children sounded like 40-year-old theater professionals, this was considered almost reckless. Second, no laugh track. A genuine act of defiance in the mid-1960s, when laugh tracks weren't just common, they were basically considered mandatory. He wanted the quiet moments to breathe. He trusted the audience, which most television of that era absolutely did not. And third, the religious monologue stays. A character reading aloud from scripture, word for word, on prime-time network television. Executives panicked. The creator held firm. Because without that moment, the whole thing was just noise. That scene is the reason the special has lasted as long as it has. None of those rules came from stubbornness. They came from someone who understood exactly what he was making and refused to let anyone sand the edges off it. Now about those child voice actors, and I use the word actors loosely, because most of them had never acted a single day in their lives. The producers didn't go to casting agencies. They went to schools. They found kids through friends, through family connections, through basically whoever seemed like they might sound right. No professional credits. No training. Just children who sounded like children. Some of the youngest cast members couldn't read the script at all. So the director fed them their lines one short phrase at a time and had them repeat each piece back. Then the audio engineers stitched all those tiny fragments together in post. That halting, slightly clipped rhythm you remember, that wasn't a stylistic choice. That was survival. The entire session happened in one single day. One day, for the whole cast, with kids who had roughly the attention span you'd expect from kids. The director later compared it to trying to direct rabbits. But the result was something no other animated show had achieved, characters that sounded genuinely like children. Not performing. Just existing. Confused, sincere, and completely themselves. The music almost got cut entirely, which would have been one of the great disasters in television history. It started with a taxi ride. A producer heard a jazz piece on the cab radio in San Francisco and decided by the time he stepped onto the sidewalk that this musician needed to score his show. But not everyone agreed. Some people thought jazz was too mellow, too adult for a holiday special aimed at kids. They wanted something bouncier. Something that felt like Saturday morning television. So the animator did what any good creative rebel does when he knows he's right, he used the jazz anyway. While the debate was still technically happening, the team was already building scenes around these tracks. And when people finally watched the footage with the music underneath it, the argument was over. It fit so naturally that removing it would have felt like pulling the floor out. That soundtrack went on to become one of the best-selling jazz albums ever made. The executives tried to stop the jazz. Instead, the jazz became Christmas. Here's a detail most people walk right past. One character in this special carries a security blanket everywhere. Everywhere. It's basically his entire personality. And in one quiet scene, he lets it go on purpose. It happens during the most important speech in the special. At the exact moment the word "fear" is spoken, the blanket drops to the ground. No dramatic music. No reaction shot. It just happens, and the scene moves on. The blanket comes back later, but wrapped around the base of a tiny struggling tree that everyone had mocked, to help it stand up straight. The message is almost embarrassingly simple. Even the smallest, most overlooked thing can hold its ground when someone chooses to believe in it. One blanket. 2 moments. One of the most quietly powerful pieces of storytelling in holiday television history. Before this special existed, animated holiday programming was essentially disposable. Shows aired once, maybe twice, then vanished. No tradition around them. No appointment. No family ritual of clearing the schedule for a specific night. Then this special aired, got massive ratings, and everything changed. Because there were no VCRs. No streaming. If you wanted to see it, you had one night a year. Families started planning around that night. They circled the date in the TV guide. They arranged the whole evening. It wasn't just a show anymore, it was a ritual. Networks noticed. Other specials became yearly traditions instead of one-off broadcasts. The entire holiday TV lineup that we grew up with, that cozy rotation you could recite from memory, exists because one humble little cartoon proved that animation could become a seasonal event. That's a pretty significant accidental legacy. And then there's the irony sitting right at the center of all of it. This special is fundamentally a story about the commercialization of Christmas. About how the holiday had been buried under advertising, pressure, and the performance of happiness. The whole point is finding something real underneath all that noise. And the original broadcast, the very first time it ever aired, had product placement embedded directly into the animation. Not in the ad breaks. In the show itself. A billboard for the sponsoring company appeared inside a scene, perfectly framed like it was part of the story. Because it was. When the sponsorship eventually ended, that shot was removed. Which is why, if you've ever watched the modern version and felt like a certain scene cuts away a little too abruptly, like something is missing, that's because something is. The editors patched the gap as best they could, but the seam is still there if you know where to look. A special about hating commercialism, originally underwritten by one of the most iconic commercial brands on earth, with product placement stitched into the animation. If that's not the most perfectly ironic thing in the history of holiday television, I genuinely don't know what is. And that's the thing. This special was made fast, under pressure, on a budget that gave nobody room to breathe. The creators thought they'd blown it. The network thought they'd aired a disaster. The jazz almost got cut. The child actors could barely read. The whole thing was delivered 10 days before air, with the final scene finished at the absolute last possible moment. And somehow, out of all that chaos, they made something that still feels like the realest thing on television every single December. If this brought back some holiday nostalgia, hit like and subscribe. We do deep dives like this all the time. Drop in the comments your earliest memory of watching a holiday special as a kid.